Hello, everybody, and welcome to 3 Words, a bite-sized podcast about the simple and yet very strategic choices you can make to become the best version of you. My name is Dr. Michael Brown. I am the host of 3 Words, and I'm here with my dear friend, Dan Costello, who is a corporate exec by day, a life coach and consultant with D&B Coaching by night. And we have a great conversation planned for you today. And the 3 words for today, Dan, are...
Schedule your priorities.
Schedule your priorities. Oftentimes we hear this notion to be managing our lives, we need to prioritize our schedule. Not true. The goal is not to prioritize your schedule. The goal is to schedule your priorities. In fact, Dr. Stephen Covey, and I know we'll talk about him today, he once said that time management has little to do with managing your time, but has everything to do with managing your life. And as I work with so many individuals now across the country and even here locally in Northwest Ohio, I'm hearing the same story, Dan, over and over and over again. It goes something like this. My life is out of control. My schedule is so crazy. How do I make sense of this mess?
I don't have enough time.
I don't have enough time, yeah. And I think at the very root of that is a belief that goes something like this. I am a slave to my schedule. I hear it all the time, even working on the college campus. I'm a slave to my schedule. That is not true. Being a slave to your schedule is 100% myth. Yeah. If your life is out of control, you've chosen it that way. You have chosen your way into a crazy, out of control life. What are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned the being out of control, because I think even when you mentioned about Covey's time management matrix, he talks about the urgent side and the important side. And so oftentimes I think the people who feel like my schedule's out of control is because everything is an urgency. And so they go through their day and the urgent things that are maybe important to them in their jobs or their day-to-day life will come up and will stress them out, or vice versa, someone else's urgencies will come in and become their urgencies. And so if you're not scheduling your priorities, I say this all the time, if you don't schedule your priorities, somebody else will schedule them for you. Because people will find that space in your calendar or in your schedule that you haven't yet blocked, and they'll just insert themselves right in there. And then you'll be mad that you don't have any time to do what you wanted to do. But you chose not to schedule your priorities first. You let someone else do it for you.
Well, for so many years of my life, I lived in 100% urgent. It's like, these are all the things I got to get done. I'm trying to prioritize my schedule. I'm trying to make my to-do list and check everything off. But here's the crazy thing. Every time I checked off that last thing on the to-do list, there's now 10 more things that pop onto my to-do list. And so I think in many ways, I learned an important lesson in the 8th grade that I didn't apply until I was much older. I was in a chemistry class when my chemistry teacher in the 8th grade, I remember it vividly, she put out in front of us 4 big rocks and then a whole pile of small rocks or pebbles. And she said to the class, let's get everything into the vase. Well, there's only one way to get everything into the vase, right? And we were 8th graders and we weren't really paying much attention, but I think we figured it out. Wait, until you put the 4 rocks, big rocks in first and all the pebbles around it, they're not all going to fit. Because if you take all the pebbles and start throwing them in the vase, not even one rock is going to make its way into that vase. And so if you want the big rocks in, the important rocks, the outcome-based rocks, if I can use kind of the Covey matrix, not just urgent, but important things that are focused more on mission and values and who you're becoming and actually how you're producing, you've got to put the big rocks in first, and then they all fit in together.
Yeah, and so as some of our listeners are hearing us talk about this, they're probably saying, well, what if I don't know what my priorities are? You know, and what if I don't have any big rocks? And I think that's part of this whole process of scheduling your priorities is you have to actually dig deep to think about what are my priorities.
Right.
And, you know, when I think about figuring out those priorities in my life, you know, we're talking about scheduling time or scheduling your priorities. You actually have to make scheduling priorities a priority. So you need to schedule time to schedule things that you're going to do throughout the rest of your day or your week or your month. So not making it important to you is automatically going to be a negative impact on your day-to-day life.
Absolutely. And this is what's been the big game changer for me. And now that I'm working on a college campus and I have this company called D&B Coaching and I'm working with athletes now across the country and even locally, there's all these things that I have my hands in. And it's been exciting, it's been exhilarating, and it's been fun. But the only thing that has kept me sane through this journey is that I invest some time not spend, but invest time on Friday, reflecting back on my week and actually saying, is there something I should do different? Is there something that I should tweak? Is there something about the last 5 days that I could do better to maximize my time so that I'm actually living in light of my priorities? But more important than that is Sunday afternoons. Sunday afternoons. You know, oftentimes fellow colleagues and even employees will talk about the Sunday scaries. It's like that feeling you have in the pit of your stomach that keeps rising up closer and closer to your throat.
We all know it.
Right. It's like Monday's coming, but to take time on Sunday for me, and it could be any day of the week really, to actually begin to decide what are the big rocks going to be? And not only what are the big rocks going to be, but how do I put them right in the schedule from 1 to 2 o'clock, from 2 to 3 o'clock? Doesn't need to be an hour. From 2 to 2:15, from 1 to 1:15. Even my front desk staff who work at the university with me, they see my schedule and all the people around me have access to my calendar. And in that calendar will say things like thinking, reflecting, strategic planning, not just appointments with human beings, but actually I get to decide, Dan, how to live my days. And if someone comes into my office to intrude upon that, or if someone tries to get in on my schedule, I ultimately have the choice whether or not I'm going to let that individual or that task or that phone call break into what I've already created for myself that reflects my values and highlights my priorities.
Yeah, and I'm so glad you mentioned this because I think this is one thing that most of us will make an excuse about, which is meetings or my schedule is only for meetings with other people. So a schedule is meant to schedule a meeting with 1 or 2 other people, and that's the only thing that your calendar has a place for. Really, scheduling your priorities, it might mean, like you say, schedule time to think or schedule time to create goals, schedule time to do a workout in the morning. You know, if you don't put those blocks in your calendar, typically something else is going to fill it, or you're just going to waste that time and then be upset that you didn't have the time to do it. So it's really important that you mention that because I think a lot of our podcast listeners are probably thinking like, this always happens to me.
It always happens to me. That's right. And I think quite honestly, if we're honest with ourselves, it's not only the intrusions of other people that tend to break in on our schedule, but if we're honest, we're not maximizing our time ourselves. I know my son, Justin, who's a third-year med student here at the University of Toledo, I was asking my son as he's continued to age, what is some of the best advice that I've ever given him? And he hands down says, Dad, the best advice you ever gave me was work college like a job. Now, obviously that targets a college student-aged individual or someone who maybe is in high school because they have all this free time and they need to schedule their time. But what happens is, what if we actually thought of our days as able to be scheduled and able to be prioritized at any given moment? Because the fact that you don't get up early in the morning, the fact that you're up till 2 a.m., at night, all of those things factor into whether or not you actually have the ability to stay on top of your schedule. And here's what's interesting. Every one of us as human beings, we have the exact same number of hours, 168 hours a week. How many minutes a day? How many hours a day? We have the exact amount of time. The difference between individuals who live in light of their priorities and those who just fly by the seat of their pants and just kind of let life happen to them reactively is how we are investing or spending those minutes and those hours and those days. We all get the exact same amount of time. But it goes back even to what you were sharing earlier too. For many of us, there's not a clear vision. Dan.
What the priorities are.
What are my priorities for my life? And so you need to maybe go back a few steps and say, what are the things that I want to be true of me at the end of my life and live today in light of them? That I'm not going to wake up someday having become someone I've not been becoming. That I'm not going to just stumble into 92 years old having all of these qualities and characteristics about myself without actually scheduling priorities now in light of then. So that might be the first project, is to think about, I've even done this for myself, a journal. Stephen Covey recommended this, that actually thinks about the end of my life and thinks about what I want to be true so that I can then create a mission statement. So that in light of the mission statement, I can create a schedule that actually reflects the mission statement, which reflects who I want to be at the end of my life. And I know you've done some of that.
And, I just want to propose a problem that I have, actually.
Okay.
Maybe just pose a problem that I have. I'm a people pleaser to some extent. And so oftentimes I am getting interrupted in my day-to-day work, or even at home. I have 2 little ones at home, and obviously they're interrupting all the time, but, which is totally okay. But at work, that people-pleasing part of me always is like wanting to help other people's urgencies. And it resonates with a lot of people when they're thinking about, hey, I had all these things that I wrote a to-do list, and it was Tuesday at 5 p.m. before I left the office. I had this to-do list done, and I was going to come in, and on Wednesday morning, I'm crushing that to-do list. And then Wednesday morning hits, and there's 10 people at your desk. There's the phone ringing, this other person, this urgent email that came through, and that to-do list is just not happening. And so that's a problem. I think that people, I don't know how you would address that problem specifically, but that's a problem for me that I can tell you.
So there are those outside circumstances that actually are pushing in on my schedule and are seeking to disrupt my commitment to scheduling my priorities.
Right.
But I know more than often than not, is this idea that it's my own choices that are actually disrupting my schedule.
Right.
The fact that I'm jumping on social media to check something that's now 20 minutes, but I've done that 5 times today. Or I take a walk around the office, or I do stay up till 2 a.m. And so instead of getting up at 5:30 a.m. to do the workout and to meditate and to reflect upon my life and really have those morning rhythms, I'm now getting up 20 minutes before work, maybe not showering and rushing off to work. And then a lot of the disruptions, a lot of the inability to schedule our priorities and live in a life that's ordered, oftentimes is not a result of all these outside intrusions. It's because of the choices I am making. And I just want to end with this. If you live like this, and I know you've experienced this in your own life, and here's the promise I make to our viewers and our listeners. If you schedule your priorities and live not only in the urgent, but in the important, you will lay your head down at the end of the day on your pillow, and you will feel deeply satisfied that you've killed it today, that you've lived a life well. You're also, and this may sound counterintuitive, you're actually going to have more spontaneity, more extra time, because you've budgeted your time, because you've made that investment. And all of those Sunday scaries or those Saturday scaries, if they're going to begin to be dispelled, because you're going to actually know that you're living a life of meaning on purpose. Why? Because you've scheduled your priorities. For life coaching, consulting services, or to hire a keynote speaker, please visit dmbcoaching.com.